Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to MovieFilm. It's episode 296. I'm Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey, man.
How's it going?
You know, it's chill, actually. I mean, you know, a little window into our process. It's a Friday morning as we record this, and it's at least in my house, it's serene because during the summer, my kids just sleep until 11 a.m.
I remember those days.
I know
fondly.
Yeah, I get woken up by my cat. He gets in bed with me and he starts batting my head around like a ball of yarn until I give him breakfast.
Yeah.
So this morning it was just me and him because I just watched the last episode of The Acolyte. I'm like,
okay. What'd you think?
You know, I got to be honest. I think this show is totally fine.
Yeah.
I'm not over the moon about it, but I enjoyed what I saw. And I'm like, oh, this is intriguing. And if they do another season, I'd be on board to see what they do, you know?
Well, I have a question. I mean, barring all...
You've not seen any of it, right?
No.
Okay.
And I was going to say, you know, I'm not interested in the people who have like stupid opinions or, you know, ignorant opinions. But for the people who are watching it and just not jiving with it, I mean, do you think it has to do with the story or does it have to do with its execution or what? You know what I mean? Like, what are those people not finding with it, do you feel?
I mean, I think it's like any of this stuff, right? These TV shows have struck me as a little bit like back in the day, you had all this Star Wars licensed fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just all these novels, and you couldn't even, no one person, well, let me rephrase, most people would not be able to keep up with all of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, I'll just follow the stuff I seem interested in, right? And not everything works. So to me, that's what it is. It's like, well, just some stuff just isn't going to work. You know, it's this one is taking us back to an era that isn't that familiar. So you're either on board with that or you're not.
Right.
Because we're in the High Republic era, which you have some familiarity with, as I recall.
Yeah. That's where Young Jedi Adventures is set.
Yeah. I was hoping for some kind of crossover. Like,
oh, I'd love that. Yeah.
Which would be, because like the two shows could not be more different. You know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a good faith critique of the show, which I don't even necessarily disagree with because it just comes down to preferences. But obviously, yeah, the ridiculousness of the discourse is such that stuff gets drowned out. But I mean, again, the season ended, and I'm like, yeah, that was fine. That's my, you know, and I don't know, maybe as a critic, that's the wrong thing to say.
Sure.
But I don't see what there is to really hate. I don't see anything that breaks canon or whatever. Like it's a very easy show to ignore if that's what you want to do. I guess that's my point.
I appreciate this take from you because I was kind of I'd been on the fence the whole way, and there'd always been other things that I wanted to see a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I hadn't gotten to it yet, but it's nice to know now that it's wrapped up that's. I mean, fine. It just depends on your perspective, but I think. For something that has so much content out there,
right?
Fine's not so bad. And if you're a little hungry for that IP at some moment, knowing that there's something that's fine out there to check out in when you have the time.
Yeah, and the way the show, the way the season ends, it's very clearly meant to pick up. And so it ended. And I'm like, well, I want to see what happens next. I'm curious, you know. I'm not like pining for it. I'm not like, oh, give it to me tomorrow, you know.
Yeah.
I tend to stay away from kind of the more heated parts of Star Wars, of any fandom online culture, because it's all awful.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious what the big silent middle, what are they saying?
Right.
But you know, there's some really cool lightsaber fights. They do some stuff that you know was alluded to in previous licensed fiction, which is now made canon. That's kind of interesting. There's one character who's only been mentioned, who we see for the first time, which I would assume that's kind of a big deal if you care about that stuff, you know.
Nice.
So I don't know. I said before, when it started, I think on this show, that the main Jedi character, who's played by Lee Jung-jae from Squid Game, I like what they gave him to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his character ends up going in directions that are somewhat unexpected. The thought I have, this is a show that is basically approaching this universe from a perspective of, the Jedi are not all squeaky clean.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They have some skeletons in their closet, and maybe your tolerance for this show will rest upon how willing you are to go with that.
I can totally see that, because I mean, I got to admit, like, if I were to watch it, I'm sure I would see the nuance and I would find it interesting, because of course, I mean, any, collective of people, no matter who they are, they're never going to be all good or all bad. But I can kind of see, I think of the earlier films where they're so escapist.
Yeah.
Especially films coming out of the 70s, right? And it's just like the good guys got to stop the bad guys. And there's something just sort of comforting and enjoyable about that, and being able to cheer at the end versus watching that 70s film where your hero dies, and it's because the guy you thought was good killed him. And, it's like, it depends what you want, what you're in the mood for.
Yeah.
And I think I've, in the moment, finding myself with my Star Wars wanting something a little bit more optimistic.
Sure.
But I also see, when you're making so many different things, you're making shows, you got the books, you got the games, you got movies up ahead. I mean, I think there's room for all of it. So sort of like what we were saying always about Marvel, where it's, rows and rows of comic book racks.
Yep.
And, take your pick.
That's definitely where I am with this. It's like, just in terms of the TV shows, we got Andor, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Acolyte. I mean, they're all doing very different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, man, just pick your lane, right? Like to me personally, I think out of all the TV shows they've done, Andor is my favorite. And I know that's not everybody's flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think, I'll mention my brother. I might have alluded to this before, but basically he's never been a huge reader.
Okay.
And he'll do audiobooks and things, but he's just like, I never want to choose a moment to sit down and actually open a book. And he even admitted it might be because I've not found a book that was worth sitting down for. I start something, I go, oh, this isn't what I want to do. And he was getting, and he also had a hard time with fiction. He felt like if he was reading something, he should be like learning something, or learning about, Abraham Lincoln or World War II or something. And, but on a whim, he wanted more Star Wars, and he wasn't enjoying a lot of the shows. So he went to Heir to the Empire, because some friends of his, and I think Reddit and whatever, were like, yeah, if you want more Star Wars books, start here. And he plowed through that trilogy. And it was just, he was like, this is so unlike me. But he plowed through that trilogy. He started the next trilogy already. Wow. And he's like, I think I like it even more than the first trilogy. Wow. And it's just really fun and exciting to see him so into it. And when we get together, he'll be like, yeah, and then Luke's like doing this right now. And it's super fun. I love it.
That's awesome.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what he should read? It's not novels, but it's Dark Horse did it as a comic book series, which I'm pretty sure it's still in print by Marvel. It's called the Dark Empire trilogy.
I'll write it down.
And that was, it's so funny because there was a time where Star Wars was not, just flowing out of the orifices of every corner of society.
Yeah.
It was a commodity, and in I'm gonna say what, 91. 91 was when Heir to the Empire came out, and then 92 shortly thereafter Dark Empire came out. And that was the first Star Wars we had seen since like Jedi, basically.
Right.
And it was a brand new thing, and so it was it was so refreshing. But I remember reading both the Zahn trilogy and the Dark Empire comics, and I really liked both of those.
Yeah. He bought me Heir to the Empire.
Oh, and nice. So, okay.
I definitely want to get to that soon.
Yeah, I just got in the last week, it arrived in the mail. Marvel put out this big omnibus hardcover collection that has all the Dark Empire comics, and then the they're the comic adaptations of the Zahn books.
Oh, cool.
And so that's literally, I've had it sitting here. I'm like, man, I need to dive in.
Mm-hmm. That's fun.
But anyway, hey, enough Star Wars. What are we, some kind of Star Wars fans or something here?
Yeah, man. You know, it's so funny. I mean, I'll say it. Like, I feel really low energy over here, but not in a bad way. Almost like, you know, I just want everybody. It reminds me of when you come to visit and we wake up and like we kind of, you know, I'll come out of my bedroom, you come out of the guest room, and then we'll kind of sit on the couch with our coffees. Yeah. And be like, so how's it going? Like, I'm feeling that kind of like peaceful, calm, like early morning energy.
It's kind of nice.
It is kind of nice. So I hope everybody's feeling cozy, at least for this episode.
Last night I couldn't watch the whole thing, but I dipped in and out of Donald Trump's convention speech.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm like, God, are we doing this again? You know?
Uh-huh.
But I was remembering how 8 years ago,
yeah,
I was in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I was, and if you remember, you know, I had been invited to the White House. This is back when Obama was president, and they had that reception, or whatever. And then that evening, I'm in my hotel room, and I'm watching Trump give his acceptance speech, and I'm like, how is that 8 years ago already?
I remember it so well because you flew from Washington D.C. to here.
It was that Friday basically. So.
Yeah.
Man, that's, I mean, 8 years ago.
Unbelievable.
Think about this. Think about this, Brian. Since we started doing this show, this is our 4th presidential election since we started doing this show.
Wow.
And of those 4, 3 have had Donald Trump on the ticket.
It's a wild moment in history. I'll say that. You know, it's funny, actually. We went, a group of us saw Twisters last night, and I guess someone, I don't know who it was, a coworker of one of the people there was like, "Oh, you're not going to listen to Donald Trump's speech tonight?" And I was like, I would have been like, I've heard it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like I can picture it.
I mean, and you're not wrong based on what I saw.
Yeah.
First of all, he spoke for 90 plus minutes.
I heard that. I heard that was a record.
Yeah, longest convention speech ever by a nominee. But I'm just like, even if you're a fan,
that's a long time,
right? I'm like, bro, what's new in this? You know what I mean? Are you just reading the dictionary at some point? Like, you know, because that's not a speech, that's a filibuster. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we're in for right now. Anyway, next couple months. So we really need our escapism.
Absolutely.
How have you escaped?
You know, it's funny. I wasn't going to mention this, but I keep getting texts from people right now. And my mornings these days have started with a lot of puzzles.
Yeah, you got me hooked on a few last time I visited you. So Strands is now part of my daily retinue.
I freaking love Strands. And I know Wordle, you know, took the world by storm already. I still play that. And but I also discovered this game called Cinematrix.
Yes.
Which is on Vulture, and I really love it because it'll have 3 actors on the left side, and then on the top it'll say something like, you know, film title with 3+ words, or made over 100 million worldwide, and you have to fill out this board with these movies. And the thing that you want to do is come up with the movies that people are least likely to pick. So you want the lowest percentage, and you get these points. And it's just funny. I have these different text groups where I play. Like this game, but not that game and this game, but not that game. And so it's like, I have 3, I want to say at least 3 chains every day where people are sending me their Cinematrix boards and Wordle, or like Strands and Connections.
How funny.
Like, so before we hopped on, that's kind of how I wake up my brain in the morning. And I'm really enjoying those. And if people aren't playing those, I especially the Cinematrix game, you know, for movie fans, I think it's really fun.
The Cinematrix the other day, I think it was yesterday. It's like Sydney Sweeney, and I'm like, well, I know Madam Web and Anyone But You, and I'm out. Like,
yep,
that's all I got. You know,
it was funny because that one had Austin Butler also.
Yep,
and it was funny because I saw everyone who sent it to me had the exact same row for him. You know, it was like Dune 2, Elvis, and
Bike Riders,
yeah. And but it's fun because they give you the limitations. It'll say, you know, 2019 to 2024 or something, right? So it's like you are, even if you know a film that he was in 2016, you can't use it. So it's anyway. that was a challenging one, and I was really happy that I watched that made for HBO movie Reality that Sydney Sweeney was in, because that really put me over the edge. So
Mazel tov.
Yeah, thanks. Anyway, so Zachy, I feel almost bad bringing this up. But a week ago, I went and did my annual tradition, and I went to the John Williams concert at the Hollywood Bowl. And I struggled over saying that because John Williams wasn't there this year, so I wasn't actually sure how to say it. Typically, the event, which is over 3 days, Friday through Sunday, it's called John Williams, Maestro of the Movies. And this year it was called Maestro of the Movies, the Music of John Williams, and More. And the reason being, for the first time to my knowledge, I mean, there's been years it hasn't happened because of COVID and whatnot, but John Williams wasn't there. And just so I don't say anything that's not correct, this is literally what was on the Hollywood Bowl website. And it said, due to a recent health concern from which he is expected to make a full recovery, John Williams will be unable to perform. Maestro Williams originally planned to share the podium with conductor David Newman, who at John's request has graciously agreed to conduct the entire concert. The program will otherwise remain unchanged. So, yeah, I got to say it was a little sad. You know, I've gone at least, I mean, over 10 times for sure. I tried to figure it out one point, but you know, I always thought as long as I live in a town where John Williams shows up and conducts once a year, I'm going to be there. And so it was a little different, but I mean, I wasn't going to miss it because I felt like I just wanted to keep that tradition alive. And I am so glad that I went because, you know, the programming was all sorts of things. It was music from other films. There was the music of Henry Mancini, but then of course there was E.T. and Star Wars and Marion's theme and, you know, Imperial Superman, which I sent you a video. And God, dude, I just teared up. Like this music touches my soul. Like this was, I've said on here before. I mean, I saw E.T. first movie in the theater when I was 5 years old, and it imprinted on me in a way that I don't even think I realized till I was older. Like this music is just part of my fabric, and when it sort of gets touched, I'm moved. And in some instances, I become a puddle. So I was very sad that he wasn't there. I'm optimistic because they're saying he will have a full recovery, whatever he's experiencing. But it was still a magical time. Just hearing his music is still very magical. So,
well, hopefully next year I can join you, and maybe a couple of my boys can make it with you.
Man, let's get to work on that. Let's look at as soon as those dates are announced, even in the fall or winter or whatever it is. Like, let's put that on the calendar, make that happen.
Let's do it.
I have one other thing, but real quick, I was going to bring this up. I came back from Twisters last night, and I was a little tired, but I wasn't ready to go to sleep. And I put on the TV, and Forrest Gump was on, and it was in the middle, and I kept it because it looked so beautiful. It was this 4K. You know, cleaned up version of it. And I was like, wow, this movie looks stunning. And so I just kind of wanted to look at it for a little bit. And then the next thing I know, I'm finishing the entire movie. And it just hooked me immediately. And I was just sort of taken with, and I started thinking about it. I was like, you know, each scene is very short. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in that movie, but they're so good that you want to see each one play out. There's never like a moment where you're like, oh, well, this is the scene where I can turn it. Like each one is, oh, now he's playing ping pong. Like, oh, now, you know, Jenny came back and he's happy. And then, oh, now he's going to go run across the country. You know what I mean? And it's, I was just retaken with what a brilliant movie it is, honestly. I
don't know, Brian, these days that's become a controversial point of view.
You know, and it really, I am open to anyone's take on that. Makes me a little sad, honestly, and especially revisiting it, the half of it last night. I was like, this movie is a masterpiece. That's my opinion. It really is. The scripting, the acting, the heart, the story itself, and the direction, man, like the camera work. It is a masterclass. It is. It isn't showy at all. but the composition and the camera movement is 100% intentional and effective. And it's just, I was like, man, Zemeckis is one of those directors. He's got the touch.
Yeah.
And even very good filmmakers aren't touched like that.
Right.
A lot of them. And it's just, he's on another level. And it just makes me sad that we haven't seen movies from him in a while where that has been on full display. And I'm really eager for him to hit it out of the park.
Well, what do you think about this new one? The Here? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, a reunion, right? With Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And I'm optimistic. I mean, the concept of it, for people who haven't seen the trailer, is literally the camera, apparently for the entirety of the movie, doesn't move.
Right.
And so it's like starts with the dinosaurs and the asteroid hitting the Earth, and the camera is locked. And then you have early settlers, and then you have a house being built, and then you have this couple meeting as teenagers and getting married and living a life. And I mean, look, man, I'm like one of the biggest Robert Zemeckis stans there is, but I also have seen some of his worst impulses get the better of him, in recent years. So I'm a little, I don't know, but like, I'm very optimistic because I think I can see a movie like that, barring even just whoever made it. I can see a movie like that really being a genius concept that someone figures out and nails and makes something super moving, and innovative. And I think he's capable. So I'm hopeful. What about you?
I worry that.
Oh no, the first word, worry. Yeah.
Well, no, but I echo everything you're saying, but my concern is, having seen, Marwan,
Yeah, I never saw that actually, but
which I thought was just not good,
Yeah.
And that was sort of a gimmick movie, I worry that this is a gimmick in search of a movie, and it's like, is there enough here for a feature?
You know what? I feel that way too, and here's why specifically. If this was a hungry young independent filmmaker with this idea, this could be like their Memento.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like they cracked it, and they would risk life and limb to execute it and show it to us. I think in recent years, when I speak of the compulsions with Zemeckis that kind of worry me a little bit, is I think he is always working out, or no, not always. He is sometimes working out new tricks, and then he finds a story as an excuse to work out a new trick.
I think that's true. Yeah.
And so I hope that this is the story that demands to be told and tells us something about ourselves and life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, is this a feature length version of the music video for "We Didn't Start the Fire"? That's what it feels like a little.
Right.
But I'll watch it. Of course, I'm going to watch it. So there's
Absolutely. Yeah. But the only really major thing I saw recently was I saw Maxine.
Yeah.
Maxine. I was saying that a lot after the movie. So I had not, a while back, I had not seen X or Pearl, which I guess are the, make up this trilogy with Maxine here, with one or two of the characters that overlap between them. And I thought Maxine looked kind of cool. I loved the vibe of it. Like this, porn actress in the 80s, kind of in the seedier side of Hollywood, but she wants to be an actress, damn it. And so she's going to claw her way however she can to get this role. Meanwhile, there's a serial killer, loose in Los Angeles. And everything about that trailer, I was like, this looks interesting, and I like the vibes of it. And so it's what made me check out X and Pearl. And I mean, I said in the previous episode, a huge part of that also was that you liked those movies too. So I felt like they were vetted a little bit. And I thought X was pretty good. In my mind, it was kind of like an elevated genre exercise in a way, and Pearl I really liked. And I think we said that was just a really fascinating character study. And I thought Mia Goth was sensational in that movie. Mm-hmm. And Maxine, oh man, Zachy, I was so disappointed.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
This trailer really did it for me. I was like, I don't know. I mean, maybe even just because I love movies and Hollywood so much, I was just like, maybe even like seeing this sort of serial killer thing and this ruthless character who will do anything to, achieve her dreams. But man, as a whole, this just kind of felt like a hollow exercise at the end of the day. Okay. Man, yeah, I was really bummed. And my friend who went with me too, who also liked X and Pearl, was like, yeah, just kind of, I don't know. I mean, it just felt like it didn't really add up to a lot at the end of the day. It felt like really successful in its vibes, really successful in recreating a tone and like a moment, an era. But at the end of the day, I just didn't really feel the story as it was going along. It just kind of felt like things were happening. And I think, Mia Goth is, like I said, she's exceptional in Pearl. And she's playing a different character, to be fair, in Maxine. But this character is very silent. Like she's kind of a silent stoic type. And I know what her motivations are. Like she's like, even if all my friends are dying around me, I will not lose this role in this movie. This is why I'm here. I'm super motivated, to almost a disgusting degree. But she was just very, like I say, silent and stoic. And I almost wish we had seen a little bit more out of her. So, like there wasn't a lot to grab onto in it with her just sort of silently observing everything around her. And, I think a lot of people have said, and, I agree that this movie is indebted to movies like Body Double, or at least it's trying to evoke them a little bit. And I watched that recently for the first time, and I really enjoyed it. And it's wacky, and it's really gross and seedy and kind of dumb, honestly, but also kind of irresistible. Like you as this goofy protagonist, if you can even call him that, because he's such a scummy guy, is going through it, you're like, what the heck is going on? Like all these things that he's observing, these mysteries, gets involved in this whole, intrigue and whatever. And it's like, I was very with him and what was going on and wanting to know what was happening. And even when the movie got really ridiculous, I just wanted to see what was going to happen next. And this one, sadly, just kind of felt like half-cooked ideas that didn't add up to like a satisfying whole. And I actually, when it got to the third act, even, I was like, okay, I kind of hate this.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the third act completely lost me. And I was like, maybe I'm alone in this. But then I listened to another podcast and I heard someone say the exact same thing. And I felt so validated, where they're like, yeah, it was just kind of, I was okay with its okayness. And then by the third act, I was like, oh, so this is just kind of dumb.
No kidding. Okay,
Yeah, I really wanted to like it more. And maybe I had a different movie in my mind from the trailer, which, like something a wee bit more sophisticated and like sort of using the era and all those sorts of things to tell some sort of satirical tale. But at the end of the day, I just don't really feel like it added up to a whole lot, which is kind of disappointing.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. But Mia Goth, she remains an intriguing person. Like I'm very curious what she'll do after these movies, because she's really proven that she's very captivating.
Well, supposedly she's in Blade, assuming that movie ever gets made.
Interesting. Yeah. And then to just, say Ty West, look at this whole trilogy series. It's just like, man, yeah, he's filled with a lot of intriguing ideas set against like very enticing, like genre pastiches. And I think some of them work better than others. And I wish this one had added up to.
So you'd say that the first two legs of the trilogy held up pretty well, but not so much the third one.
Yeah. That's and maybe again I had higher hopes for this one, or at least what I thought I might get out of it.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to talk about it with you. When you,
well, I mean, I'm slightly less inclined to check it out now, just because, it's not exactly a ringy endorsement that you gave. So,
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it might be worth. It's like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't watch it with your kids, but it's pretty like.
Oh, really? Don't go through the trilogy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I maybe it's obvious, but I
was going to take my daughter. She's 7.
She needs to learn about Hollywood and why she shouldn't move there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but no, it's
don't move to Hollywood in the 80s, sweetheart.
Yeah. You know what I will say though? One more thing. I did. the first X is supposed to sort of evoke that 70s Texas Chainsaw thing, and I thought it really did. And not in an overly obnoxious way. It just actually felt like it was filmed in the 70s in kind of a cool way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pearl felt like this Technicolor, almost Wizard of Ozzy thing, which was kind of cool, really bright poppy reds. And this one, I don't know if it was shot on film, but it had that weird sort of blurry effect, almost like you were watching a VHS tape.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really cool. So
interesting. Okay.
There's some stuff here. Here, but I just wish it had added up to something more complete and satisfying.
Okay.
So that's all I got.
Well, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back because we got some listener letters. And we are back, and here let's dip into the old mailbag, Brian.
Letters. We've got letters.
Here's a note we got from Alex Naom at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com, and he says, "Tally ho and pip pip, gentlemen. Inspired by your recent-ish commentary for Escape from the Planet of the Apes, I sat down and watched all 5 original films." Look at this. This is how you get on my good side.
Yeah. You're doing the Lord's work, Zachy, with the Ape series.
I'd heard over the years that all but the first one were trash, but you piqued my interest, and I'm so glad you did. He says 2 things about the series really stood out to me. Firstly, how different in tone and style each sequel was. It was one of the big factors, along with the ever-decreasing budgets, that kept the series running for that many installments. The other was how years of lore and off-screen development were dropped as a line or 2 of exposition, and I didn't really mind it. Things like Caesar's time with Armando, the obliteration of cats and dogs, the nuclear war, etc., etc. I feel like audiences these days wouldn't be so forgiving of a film for doing this. Just look at The Last Jedi. All in all, I really enjoyed watching the series, and I suspect I will revisit all 5 of them again multiple times in the future. I've continued along with the recent reboot and am halfway through Dawn. Look at that. Yeah, I feel accomplished this morning, I have to say. And what he says is really true, right? I think what's a bit novel is each of the sequels is doing something totally different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
And nowadays I applaud that, because I'm like, man, you're just taking a swing, and it helps that the very thing that makes them less ambitious is also what kept the series going. Is okay, we're cutting the budget in half, cutting it in half again.
Yeah. But you know why they still succeed, and this is something I feel like we see a little less and less. It reminds me of the sort of Twilight Zone-esque types of stories that they are, where you could sum them up in one sentence or by asking a question, and you go, well, I want to know the answer to that question. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Like that kind of storytelling. And each sequel, right, is a different question. Or like, well, what if 2 of the apes escaped when the planet blew up in the future, and then they landed in modern day Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Like, well, what does that look like? I would like to know.
That's really true. I mean, obviously we've talked enough about how the tendency with big franchises these days is, oh, this one was successful, now we have to spend more on the next one. And I'm not saying cut budgets in half. I am saying, well, maybe figure out what your ceiling is and spend accordingly, and then you get some longevity out of these things.
Right.
I earlier this year we were talking about Ghostbusters, and how this latest one topped out at about 110, 115, something like that domestically, and I don't know what it made internationally. But I'm like, well, that's not nothing. So maybe spend in a way to say, well, hey, we know we're going to make this much,
right,
somewhere in this vicinity, and and make it work, because there's clearly an audience, and that would just allow for more diversity of ideas in the marketplace, so that not everything has to be a 4-quadrant Skybeam movie. Yeah,
and that's exactly that. I was just thinking, with the Apes films in mind, like, as long as an intriguing idea, if there's something personal to the character, and so it doesn't have to be that New York is about to be obliterated, or even like the world.
Yeah,
it's like maybe there's a personal thing with one ghost, and it ends up with like a chase, through like a library or something, and the shelves, and it's just really tense and personal, and that could be equally as exciting.
I mean, they've never done just a straight haunted house movie with Ghostbusters.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just do that, you know?
Yeah.
Cycling back to apes, I was thinking about how, I mean, this latest one that came out, presumably did well enough to warrant, you know, continuation of whatever they're doing. But I've said before, I'm like, well, it is a planet of apes. And I'm like, how about, let's see what Europe is like.
Totally.
Right? Like that sounds interesting to me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's so much room and time that you can cover. There's all kinds of avenues of stories that are available. And I would think, again, you've got at this point a pretty baked in audience that will likely show up. So why not have some fun with it? Have some fun with the premise.
Kind of like A Quiet Place. Right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What's going on over here?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, thank you. Alex adds one more thing. He says, I wanted to reply to Brian's call in your last regular episode for diehard Shrek fans. Hey, look at that. You put up the call, you get a response. He says, I count myself as one of them. I was 13 when the first Shrek came out, and it remains one of my favorite films. I watched it so many times that I almost had it all memorized. Wow. I even did a reenactment of the onion scene in a year 9 drama class with my mate. The first two are magnificent, and I hope that the upcoming 5th installment is a return to form.
I love that. See, this is we've talked about this, Zachy. I think as we get older, we have our staples, and everyone we talk to has the same staples, or, you know, the people who are close in age. And then when we grow up, the first movie I remember this happening, we grow up and all of a sudden people are like, Hocus Pocus is a masterpiece. And I go, what? Like that. I mean, I remember that came out and it kind of came and went, and I don't feel like anybody saw that. But we didn't see that, but another generation did, or at least they watched it on cable. And I used to feel like, what? I don't get it. And now I've, you know, as you get older, I just love fandom. I love people being fans of things, and I've loved learning what
in a wholesome way. We should stipulate.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I love learning that there's like a generation that is obsessed with different movies that I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And
I'm waiting for toxic Hocus Pocus fandom. I don't know what
Jedi
that looks
comes
like.
out. Yeah. Everybody turns on each other.
Wait, Sarah Jessica Parker killed Bette Midler or whatever. Yeah.
That would be incredible. But no, because I remember seeing Shrek and thinking it was funny, and just that was kind of where it ended. And I love that there's this huge fan base for that movie, and that there's a new one coming. So yeah, this is exactly it. I really appreciate Alex writing in. I was curious what people were feeling then about the announcement of Shrek 5. So that's awesome. I love too that Alex recreated the onion scene in a drama class. That's amazing.
I've seen part of the first Shrek.
Wait, part? You haven't even seen the whole thing?
I haven't seen the whole thing.
Oh, it's funny. I bet your kids would like it.
Oh, I'm. This isn't some antipathy on my part. It's just, you know, it missed me and I never got to it.
Yeah. I remember the gingerbread man being tortured. And
I remember it being very pop culture reference heavy.
Yeah, that's the thing that is kind of interesting, because it was like capitalizing on things in that moment, like The Matrix, but it was also like one of the first movies I can remember where you had a princess singing to a bird, but then the bird would blow up from a high note. And that felt very different, you know, because we still were in that sort of Disney era. Right. Where they wouldn't joke like that.
Sure.
So it felt kind of subversive for doing those kinds of things.
Was that 2001 that came out?
About that?
I think so, right? That sounds right.
Yeah. If even 2000, maybe.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it just completely missed me. Yeah. I think my kids have seen some of them, but, you know, I mean, look, I watched Puss in Boots, the new one from a couple of years ago, and I loved it. I mean, that was like one of my favorite movies of that year. Yeah,
it was really good. I agree.
You know. Thank you for that, Alex. Here's another note I got on Twitter. This is from Simon Jacobs, who says, I've loved the variety of commentary tracks this year. Going from She's All That to The Shadow with the Flintstones in between is the best kind of whiplash.
I mean, That makes me really happy. I almost makes me want to high five you, Zachy. It's been some good programming this year, and frankly, most of that comes from you. So
I appreciate that. Well, he says, how do you decide what movies to do commentaries for? At first, I thought you guys picked movies you're big fans of, i.e. Planet of the Apes or T2. But then I listened to you on Bad Boys and maybe not. Would love to know your thought process. What is our thought process, Brian?
Well, it definitely began, I think, as movies we love because we knew we had a lot to say about them. I mean, you and I are, voracious when it comes to things that we love, and we read about them and we watch the commentaries, and we love just building up files and files of information about things that we like. So we felt like we had, I think, something to say back. But then it started to become anniversaries often. Right.
Yeah,
if there was a sequel coming out, or if there was an anniversary, it's the 10-year anniversary of such and such. And then I would say that's a big part of it recently. It tends to be tied to something.
Yeah. Like we did Beverly Hills Cop, we did Mad Max.
Even The Shadow, isn't that an anniversary?
Yeah. 30th anniversary this year. Flintstones also. Yeah.
But I feel like you could almost go to any year, like 94, 5, 6, 7, and find something that either we like or something that we remember and kind of want to revisit and talk about, that was a moment in time. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I definitely feel like we've steered into that a lot more this year, where it's like, hey, we want to watch this. Maybe we can have a conversation about it. And it's at this point, it's the equivalent of you and I hanging out, being like, hey, let's just throw this on.
Yeah.
And then usually we're just kind of bullshitting with each other while we're watching.
Yep.
So it's just that, but recorded.
Yeah. I mean, especially with She's All That. I don't know if that's something we would have initially thought ahead of time to do, but I think we realized there was an anniversary. We were obviously there for that moment, for that movie. And we just thought it would be fun. Yeah. To let's hang out and revisit She's All That.
Yeah. And I mean, even Flintstones and stuff. Like I let me put it this way. I don't think we would ever pick something like, this movie sucks. Let's just dogpile on it for 2 hours. I don't think we would do that.
Same. Yeah.
Right. But we're always coming at it from, could we have an interesting conversation? Right. So even if it's a movie we're not in love with, I mean, okay, so like Bad Boys, which we did last time, I didn't realize until watching it in prep for this, I was like, I'm not really crazy about this. So that sort of happened as I was watching it,
I was surprised too. I was surprised. I think it's perfectly fine. But I think in the middle somewhere, I was like, I'm surprised that I'm feeling this movie is dragging. And then it was surprising to me that you agreed. And then, that's kind of the thing, right? I love that we didn't know what we were getting into. It just felt like we plopped on a couch together, hit play, and we're just walking through it.
It's usually, like you said, it's just me bouncing something off you. Like, hey, this thing's got an anniversary coming up. What do you think? So that I've enjoyed our sort of flights of fancy this year. That's been fun for me.
Totally same. I think it sort of moved the boundaries of our sandbox a little bit. Like, maybe we could try that. Or
exactly. Right?
I like this movie, but I wouldn't have thought to suggest it.
Exactly. So that's kind of that's where I'm at. So and we've said this all along. Look, we take suggestions. Plenty of people have written in asking for stuff, and a lot of times we end up doing it. So
well, it's helpful to know what people want to hear. I mean, I definitely want people to be interested in what we're doing. So I always appreciate that.
Let's take another short break, and we'll talk up some trailers and headlines. And we are back. And hey, I thought this we talked up some trailers last week, and this one dropped like the day after we recorded, which usually is the case. But I was like, well, we should talk about the trailer for Captain America: Brave New World.
Yeah.
Let's first play some of the audio from this.
You and I haven't always agreed in the past, but I want to make another run at making Captain America an official military position.
And if we disagree on how to manage this situation, then what happens?
Work with me, Sam. We'll show the world a better way forward.
All right, so this year, I think we've talked about it before. It's been MCU light, other than Deadpool and Wolverine, which is coming out. Well, I guess by the time people are listening to this episode, it'll probably be in theaters.
Wow, yeah, that's true.
Right, but next year they've got a couple things lined up. Foremost among them being Captain America: Brave New World. This is the fourth Captain America movie, and it's due out Valentine's Day of next year.
Oh, interesting. February.
It is. Yeah. So this is kind of a big deal. I mean, Sam Wilson is now Captain America.
I think this feels. This is kind of going back to core Avengers, characters, and so, this is
Harrison
a big.
Ford is now William Hurt.
Yeah, that's right. I think I had kind of forgotten that too. So
Sure.
I wasn't thinking of that character. I wasn't applying that when I was seeing Ford in the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see this trailer, and this is me. I'm like, good. Like it just feels good to be back in this corner of Marvel.
I think so too, and I think I was especially taken with the filmmaking.
Explain that.
I really like how it looked. I thought I think some of these movies can kind of feel. I hate this. This is so lame. Like samey,
Sure.
where they just sort of look like they were all shot on using the same backgrounds and the same sort of lighting and the same whatever. And it's like, so you're just hoping that the characters are interesting or the story's interesting. But this looked really kind of reminded me of like a throwback thriller.
Sure.
The tension that I could just feel in the frame and I just like how it looked, frankly. And that for me personally, that's a big deal.
Well, and I think generally speaking, the Captain America: The Winter Soldier is still held up as one of the best, if not the best, MCU movie.
Yeah,
and certainly you get a little bit of Winter Soldier vibes from this.
Definitely, sort of like
right?
Tense thriller vibes.
Yeah, like political thriller, right?
Yeah, not. I have to admit, it's been at least a week since I saw it, but a little less fantastical. And more like a fantastical person in a tense real world situation is what I remember about it, that's our brand, man.
Yeah. Well, and I've always been a fan of Anthony Mackie in these movies, but I'm very intrigued by what they do with him as Captain America. I just find that really interesting.
Yeah. There's a line, again, I feel kind of ill-equipped at the moment, but Ford as president says something like, "You're not Captain America," right? Or something like, "You're not."
He says, "You may be Captain America, but you're no Steve Rogers."
That's what it is. Yeah, and he's like, "Nope, I'm not." Kind of a thing, which I kind of dig, and it's almost like getting ahead of the audience too, in a way. It's like, no, he's not. Like he's this Captain America. Let's go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the racial dynamics, which to me are most interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, how much of that will Disney really let them lean into?
Mm-hmm.
So there's sort of that, and I'm just curious. I mean, that's not a critique. It's just genuine curiosity. And then of course the trailer ends with the shot of the Red Hulk.
Yeah.
Which now I should say I've never been a big fan of the visual of the Red Hulk.
Wait, why is that specifically? It's not related to character, but it's just the way he looks.
Just visually, he looks like a chili pepper.
That's funny.
He looks like an angry chili pepper,
Yeah, that's funny.
Right. So just visually, I have not read enough of the comics to really have a judgment about that. However, in the comic books, the Red Hulk is Thunderbolt Ross, which to me, I have a couple thoughts. I'm like, well, that would explain why they chose to continue the Thunderbolt Ross character via recasting as opposed to retiring the character following William Hurt's death.
Right.
On the other hand, I'm like, are they setting up a swerve? Like maybe the Red Hulk will be somebody else.
That could be, yeah.
Because in my head, I'm picturing a mocapped CGI Hulk-looking Harrison Ford, and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to see that.
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait. Why? Wait. Actually, why is that? I'm sort of two minds. Part of me does kind of want to see that, but I think I know what you mean.
How do you? I'm having a hard time picturing that and not chuckling to myself.
Yeah, because of his energy.
Maybe. Yeah, because and you'll be like, well, that's Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Like, and granted, I mean, CGI technology has improved. However, I don't think it's speaking out of school to say, Marvel has had some issues recently as far as their CGI.
Mm-hmm.
So, you worry it'll look like Dwayne Johnson in The Mummy Returns or something,
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's funny. I'm less worried about that and more worried about the dissonance or something between what I know of Harrison Ford and then seeing him suddenly be like,
That's true too. So interesting, I hope it's good. I mean, supposedly there have been a whole slew of reshoots and everything else, right?
Yeah. Like an entire new character added. Yeah.
Yeah, Giancarlo Esposito, right? And he has said, by the way, nobody has guessed who he's playing, which I find interesting. He's like, it is an established character, but nobody's guessed yet who it is.
Interesting. Well, I'll say this. If this was the fourth Marvel movie of this year, I don't know that I'd be thinking about it much, but I really do feel like it's been a minute. I'm ready. I think maybe a little bit of distance made the heart grow fonder. So
maybe.
Yeah.
And I would also say this. I mean, Marvel's issues as far as reshoots and everything else have, long been part of the conversation, like they fix stuff in post as opposed to just having it all mapped out ahead of time. And obviously that's something that needs to be addressed. However, I would also say, if you have an opportunity to fix the movie, shouldn't you take the opportunity as opposed to just go with what you have?
I mean, I agree with that. I think it's crazy because they're able to be sort of like improvisational filmmakers on an unprecedented scale in terms of budget and resources, so it feels, when you look at the price tag, it can't help but feel a little irresponsible and potentially gross. But I don't know. I mean, of course, like at the end of the day, objectively, if someone has the opportunity to fix their movie and make it a little stronger along the way as they go along, absolutely. I want the best version.
I mean, supposedly the budget for this thing is somewhere in the realm of $300 million, which you shouldn't be spending that much, period. Right?
Crazy.
Especially for a Captain America movie. However, the other thought I have is, I mean, unless the bottom just completely falls out of MCU fandom, they'll probably make enough to justify that, right? Like,
that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about the math. What math makes sense for each movie, and Marvel has not been performing the way I think they would like recently. Having said that, though, I would imagine this movie and the upcoming Avengers movies that got announced, we can kind of assume what those will make. So I mean, maybe you can play with a different kind of money.
I mean, for next year, they've got 4 movies scheduled. So you got first quarter is Captain America: Brave New World. First weekend of May, you have Thunderbolts ***, and I don't know why that asterisk is there, but it is driving me slowly insane. Which honestly, that's a bigger question mark to me than Captain America.
Which one is that
movie? The Thunderbolts with like, I mean, who's in this? We got it's like a Marvel Black Ops team. You got Florence Pugh, Wyatt Russell, David Harbour, Right? Oh, and Sebastian Stan, I guess, is the nominal lead.
Yeah, question mark is a good way to put it.
Right?
Sure
like, I feel like,
yeah,
like that one, maybe don't spend $300 million on.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? And then, oh, Fantastic Four, end of July.
Ooh, yeah.
Wow, that's like almost exactly a year away as we record this.
Wow.
Which I expect that one will do pretty well. And then they've got Blade scheduled for November, which let maybe write that one down in pencil, because
right.
they're just cycling through directors. It's like a revolving door. I feel so bad for Mahershala Ali on that.
I know.
Because first of all, like perfect casting. And he, having won a second Oscar, shows up at Marvel. He's like, I want to play Blade. They're like, done deal. And for 6 years, he's just sitting around like going, what the F, guys? You know?
I mean, it's creative differences, right? I think people are having a hard time landing on what they want to do.
They can't figure out a script, I guess. But I mean, they've gone through, I think, 2 directors at this point. So we'll see. That's kind of a TBD right now. But regardless, I think 3 movies is probably the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think so. Beginning, middle, end of the year, definitely.
I think so. Yeah. Now, actually, while we're talking MCU, worth mentioning the news that broke just a couple days ago, which is that the brothers Russo, Joe and Anthony, are supposedly in talks to come back to the MCU and helm Avengers 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So now this too, there's been kind of a revolving door thing, because at one point, Destin Cretton, who did Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, he was going to do the 5th one, I think. Was he going to do the 5th one or the 6th one? He wasn't going to do both.
Okay, I don't know. I remember his name though being tied with
that was going to be called the Kang Dynasty. Anyway, the 5th one. So we got Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, Avengers: Secret Wars. And then obviously everything with Jonathan Majors happened. The whole domestic abuse thing, coupled with the fact that Ant-Man Quantumania, which was the character, Kang's sort of introduction, was not particularly well regarded.
Yeah.
And so I think those 2 things together is like, okay, let's do a mulligan on this.
You know what's funny? I remember him being introduced in Loki.
A version, but like Kang was introduced in Ant-Man.
But whatever, that character, the actor, I was like, oh, I don't like this.
Because he was like, he's like doing a lot of that. Yeah,
going for a thing, and I was not vibing with the thing. But then yeah, when he was in Ant-Man or another version of him or whatever, I was like, oh, I like this a little better. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then it turns out he real life things, and I was like, well, that's all going.
So much for that. Well, and they, I mean, the second season of Loki effectively wrapped up the Kang story pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
Should they choose not to go back to it, which I guess is the case. And I agree with you. I thought he was good in Ant-Man and the Wasp. That movie had issues that were unconnected to his performance in that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, and we've talked about this a little bit, I think hanging their hat for the last few years on all this multiverse stuff, I think they've overestimated people's affinity for multiverses.
Yeah.
Like, notwithstanding your occasional Spider-Man No Way Home or whatever, I think people are just kind of multiversed out.
I agree. I think it's fun, even for something like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
It's a cool, avenue for you to explore wild things in a wild way. Or actually, in that one, a heartfelt, simple thing in a wild way.
In a wild way, yeah.
Which gives you like a different kind of perspective and feeling about that simple thing. But if that's just going to be a part of every single story now, it's going to get a little exhausting and also make you feel like, does anything matter? So
right.
Yeah.
Now, granted, as we are having this conversation, neither of us have seen Deadpool and Wolverine. So for all, like, a week from now, we'll be like, that was amazing. I love multiverses. Plug them into my veins, right?
But I think specifically with that one, I think it will probably work. I'm going to go out on a limb because that movie is about jokes.
Sure. And it's already kind of a break the fourth wall kind of thing.
Exactly. So like they get to do, use the multiverse in a way that other movies probably even can't.
Yeah.
You know, where like Kevin Feige's probably going to appear in the movie. You know what I mean?
Sure,
Like as a
sure.
character. So
Yeah.
it's like, that's fun and that's unique and that's cool that that movie can use that in that unique way. But just
Right.
if every single Marvel story has to do with like, oh, well, this guy comes from a universe where he's dead or he's not dead. You know, I mean, it's going to start to feel like a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think you have to make it something special. I mean, just going back to with Spider-Man No Way Home, you know, they were showing that on TV the other day, and I happened to channel surf across the part where Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire first show up, and I was thinking about, I was like, this works because of sort of the baked-in affinity we have for those prior iterations, and there's something rewarding about knowing that those versions still quote unquote count.
Yeah, it works on so many. I thought that was a huge success. I thought it worked on so many levels, even for our current Peter Parker and the lessons he had yet to learn, and then got to have his sort of brethren, the only people who could understand, help him through what he was going through. I thought that was like a chef's kiss version of using the multiverse.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you know, with the Flash, which it's funny how like that movie has just completely fallen out of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? I said it at the time. I'll say it now. I still like it. Mm-hmm. And not so much the sort of the stuff at the end got a little overblown, I think, as far as, oh, remember this person, remember that. But as far as how they incorporated Michael Keaton. Mm-hmm. And his Batman and made it feel valid and important. Like, to me, that's the utility. That's my point. Like, that's what you have available to you if you do it right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to reach back and say, this thing that had value to you, it still has value because of X, Y, and Z. Right? I'm tickled by that.
And what I remember most about that is not crazy wild branches and all the fun that could be had with that, but I remember it being a story about a boy and his mom.
Yeah, right. You know? Yeah. Like I think that's the you know, if I can use another example, right? Like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, right?
Right.
What I appreciated about that film is, rather than just be like, hey, we cut the cord, we're starting over, they did the harder thing of saying, we're starting over, but it's all connected. And that allows something meaningful where you have Leonard Nimoy's Spock essentially bless Zachary Quinto's Spock.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I 8 years ago with Star Trek Beyond, the third one of those movies, you know, it ends. I don't know if you remember this, but there's a scene where the Quinto Spock is looking at the effects of the Nimoy Spock who's passed away, and he looks at a picture of the crew, the original crew, the William Shatner crew, and that's what I love. I love that you can do that. You can say, yes, there's different versions, but it's all valid and it all intertwines. And this one gives meaning to this one, and it feeds back and forth.
Right.
So that's my point is, when we talk about a multiverse, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
The bad stuff is if you're like, oh, this is Brian from Earth 633, and you know he was a doctor in that reality, and oh, here's the Brian from this Earth, and he's a car salesman there. And it's like, come on, man, do I need a scorecard here? You know,
right.
I
agree. I agree with those.
So I think that's sort of the dilemma Marvel has right now, where they're just trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do. But regardless, the narrative of late has not been great for Marvel stuff. So I think reaching out to the Russos, who arguably carried it to its highest heights, well, financially, I mean, that's not even arguable.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I also think it's interesting that the Russos themselves, who haven't really had a great deal of success post-Marvel,
they didn't find a stride afterward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense for them too, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because when you sent me the article, and I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But I also thought, well, yes, they're the filmmakers that made the movies we seem to like the most. However, they must have some angle. You know, they must have some hook that everybody agrees is the way to go, and to maybe course correct a little bit, or at least try to get people back on the bandwagon in the way that they used to be. And I'm kind of curious what that is, because I mean, I think this is reported news about like Bob Iger not being very happy with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And trying to get some ships back on track. And so, yes, having them back is interesting, but I'm also like, so what's the idea they had? Or what are they going to do to try to get everybody feeling the way they did about these stories, 6 years ago or whatever?
That's the problem to me anyway, right? Is that Avengers Infinity War and Endgame were a culmination of 10 years, right?
Right.
And I don't feel like we've reached culmination stage yet.
Not culmination, but also it was a collection of characters that we all liked, and we liked seeing them together.
Right.
Now those people are kind of scattered to the wind, and I think they thought they could assemble another collection, and I don't know that it worked in the same way.
And just to piggyback on what you're saying, we haven't had yet the equivalent of Avengers 1 yet.
Yeah, sure.
With like whatever our new batch of characters is. Like, what does the Avengers look like? Is it Shang-Chi and Ms. Marvel and whatever? Like, I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm just saying you haven't put any of these characters together.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
She-Hulk, I mean...
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's been the overwhelming response with those characters that the previous characters had also.
Right.
So it almost feels like you still need those core characters, and then you could add these people on, and that might work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, is there like a dump truck of money on its way over to Robert Downey Jr.'s house at the moment? I don't even know how that would work. But
so he has said like he would come back if they
Uh-huh.
Now I'm sure that's him. Downey's no dummy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's smart enough to leave that door open, because why wouldn't he, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Feige has been very clear, like, we're not going to undo that death.
And I would say wisely.
So then it's like, well, then I mean, what's to gain other than, hey guys, I'm Tony Stark from Earth, 334. Here, I'm a pool cleaner on this Earth.
Yeah. I mean, look, actually, when you just said that, I was like, oh, that's actually interesting. Where he's not this brilliant scientist guy and whatever, but he has it inside of him, and maybe they need to bring it out of him. And he's not a hero, and he's not cocky and whatever. He's very humble, and life is beating him up, and like maybe he finds. I could get into that.
He's the hero they need, not the one they deserve.
Yeah, yeah. And then to see that guy discover the thing inside of himself.
I don't know.
Let's get Disney on the line.
Yeah. I guess I will always root for the MCU movies, because I want them to be good. I want I love this universe.
Mm-hmm.
I do worry that we may be dealing with sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts,
Mm. You mean currently, or you mean continuing, moving ahead?
I think that we've just had our first outright MCU flop.
Sure.
In the Marvels, a movie that both of us were ultimately okay with.
Yeah, it's a perfectly cromulent Marvel film.
I totally agree. And so I worry that that's not a one-off, that it may be the tip of a larger iceberg of apathy. And I've said this before. This is a self-inflicted wound, in that Disney, presumably under the previous Bob Chapek regime, was just like, just crank that shit out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, Agatha series, let's go.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing too. That's a whole other side story with these streaming services and them being like, we got to make these things work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's just like, just put Marvel crap on it and people will come.
Yeah. And the lesson, and you can attest to this, I'm sure, it's the more stuff there is, the easier it is to just be like, you know what, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and so that spread outward from the TV shows onto the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Scarcity is the key. I mean, say what you will, the James Bond movies, they come out whenever they come out, people show up.
Yeah, yeah. They still feel special.
They still feel special. And we're at a point where we're longing for the days when Marvel was, quote unquote, only 3 movies a year.
Right.
And, I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, we got some other headlines, Brian.
Yes.
Man, a lot of people have passed away since the last time we recorded.
I know. A shocking amount.
It's a lot, right? It feels like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley Duvall.
Yep.
So Shelley Duvall, first time I ever saw her was as Olive Oil.
Oh, really?
Yes. In the 1980s Popeye movie. And maybe it's not a compliment to say somebody was born to play Olive Oil, but I'll tell you, she was born to play Olive Oil.
Absolutely. I mean, it goes beyond just even like physical appearance, which obviously it really, really worked, but even just comedic chops.
Yeah.
Playing this old sort of 1930s cartoon kind of character with the voice and everything. And of course, I associate that song now with the He Needs Me with Punch Drunk Love,
Yeah.
And so it's like I have this weird, different sort of emotional attachment, this sort of wistful, hopeful, I don't know, like loving sort of feeling tied with that song because of the film.
But yeah, see, she was 75 years old, obviously, in addition to Popeye. She was in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Nashville, Annie Hall.
Oh, The Shining.
And, of course, The Shining.
Yep.
Which Stanley Kubrick, by all accounts, was just awful to her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's a hard movie for me to watch, in that it is great. It's engrossing and the performances are amazing. And yet you watch Shelley Duvall in this movie giving an amazing performance.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you realize she got there after sustained mental anguish at the hands of Stanley Kubrick.
That's true. That's
right?
True. Yep.
And she basically stopped acting after like the 80s.
Yeah. She had, there was an article that came out like a year or two ago, right? Where someone kind of tracked her down and interviewed her and, almost like checked in on her. And it's like, no, she's cool. She's living her life.
Yeah.
Moved away from it.
Yeah. And yet, I mean, those are performances. I mean, God, The Shining, that's a forever film.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like 50 years from now, people will still be watching The Shining.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And again, that's the paradox of interfacing with that movie. But no doubt it would not work as well. Jack Nicholson's performance would not work as well were he not playing off of Shelley Duvall doing what she was doing.
100%. Yeah, you're right. It's like, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? Because when I think of it, I just think about how amazing she is. And I think sometimes I forget about what they did to get her there. Yeah,
I mean, I feel the same way when I watch Titanic, and I know that James Cameron was just like verbally abusive to Kate Winslet,
Right.
So
she's incredible in it. He'll
be like, oh, well, she got an Oscar nomination out of it,
Right.
But Shelley
by the way,
Duvall,
when I say she's incredible in it, I don't say that excusing that behavior or saying that kind of behavior is what got her there.
No. Right.
Like you don't need to do that. That's abuse. And I think it's ridiculous. So I want to make that clear.
Totally agree. Yeah. Other icons of the 80s, Richard Simmons and Dr. Ruth.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more familiar with Richard Simmons. I think Dr. Ruth was such a staple of like late night talk shows in the 80s. And I know her as almost a caricature.
Yep.
I mean, she almost felt like one because I think she was 4'7", and she had this, German accent, and she was talking about penises. She was a sex therapist. And so, and it was kind of wild, I think, in the 80s to have someone out there talking so plainly, right, about such things. And what made her kind of an icon.
Yeah, I think both of them were sort of like part of the talk show circuit. That's how we knew of them.
Yep. And even as a kid, I mean, Richard Simmons, I think, being the way he was, this very flamboyant type of personality in the 80s was probably not an easy thing. But my memory of him as a kid was always really loving him because he seemed so kind.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's, I mean, I know he had Letterman appearances where Letterman enjoyed ribbing him.
That's right.
And, but like, I always remember feeling like I wasn't on Letterman's side. I was like, don't make fun of that guy. He helps people. You know, like he's a really kind person.
Well, and he came at it, you know, his role. Well, you know, and the joke was like, oh, he's like a fitness instructor, but he doesn't look very fit, you know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's like, well, he was obese
as a child,
yeah, and he lost that weight, and he found a place of fitness that worked for him, and so he was, from his own experience, he was able to empathize with people's struggles, and I think that's what appealed to people about him.
Yeah, and then he had this, for people who don't know, this really popular video series, Sweatin' to the Oldies, where they would play oldies, and he would have, you know, people behind him following him and the moves that he was doing, but they were people of all shapes and sizes, you know, and it wasn't like a bunch of models doing some sort of aerobics video, and it was just very relatable. I think we even had a copy of that in our house, and it was just hugely popular, and you can, looking back on it now, understand why. It's very accessible, and it's coming from a guy who's coming from a genuine place.
Yeah. But he was 76, and apparently he had fallen.
Oh,
and that's what precipitated it. But apparently it's just died of natural causes.
Well, I mean, it's worth mentioning on a movie podcast recently. You know, there'd been a podcast in the past couple of years. I think it was something like, "Where did Richard Simmons go?" You know, and they're trying to figure out, we haven't heard from him for a while. What's going on with him? Is he okay? And I think he basically then, you know, he's just living his life privately, and then was like, "I'm fine. You don't need to hunt me down."
Yeah.
You know, like, thank you. And then in the past year, Pauly Shore was interested in making a movie about Richard Simmons' life, where he would play Richard Simmons, and they made a short film, I think a kind of a proof of concept kind of thing. And Richard Simmons was like, "I really don't want that to happen. Like, I you know, you're doing this without my involvement. I don't know Pauly Shore. I actually am in communication with major studios about a story of my life, and everybody please maybe wait for that one."
He's like, "I've seen In the Army Now, and no thank you."
right. So that was kind of a little bit of uncomfortableness, I thought.
He's like, "I'd rather have Yahoo Serious play me." Thank you.
Yahoo Serious. Yeah.
That's this weird thing where recently you have like people campaigning for roles in public.
Yeah, I mean, that's social media, right? They can almost get a finger on the pulse immediately, and then maybe even see if they get some sort of great response. Then the studios will go, "Oh, well, the proof's in the pudding. I can see it right in front of me. Look at all the likes. Everybody's into it. Let's do it."
Well, there was and I'm sure you probably saw this, where this thing went viral maybe a year or so ago, of this actor who wanted to play Robin Williams. You see this?
Yes. He also that guy also does a Harrison Ford, right? Is that the guy we're thinking of?
I think it's a different guy.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they put out like a scene, a scene from a hypothetical movie.
I forgot about this, but yes, I did see that.
It's for those of you who don't know, it's this actor. We should look it up, but it's he's playing Robin Williams behind the scenes of Mork and Mindy, and he is told that John Belushi has died.
Mm.
And it's him playing that, whatever, you know?
Right.
And this thing went viral. People are like, "Oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's like looking at Robin Williams." And Zelda Williams, Robin Williams' daughter, like put out a statement. She's like, "Please stop sending this to me."
Yeah.
Like, she's like, it's a fine impersonation, but you're asking me to watch this guy imitate my deceased father as his lowest emotional point as he processes the death of his friend. Like this is weird. Do you not understand that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right. And it's, you know, like that's the side of things that people don't think about.
It's funny because I think, you know, some people are public figures, and if someone wants to make a movie about it, they can. However, it does seem like most people try to involve the families. It's almost rarer when a family is not consulted. on a film like that, right? So yeah, it
Yes.
feels just very unfair then that people can do that now, and then yeah, poor his daughter can get just inundated with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Without
Hey, look at this guy imitating your dad. Like, I mean, I don't know. That seems like a lot to process, you know. Jamie Costa, by the way, that's the actor's name who performed that scene. Jamie Costa.
Yeah.
Actually, while we're talking about the 80s, Benji Gregory, Brian.
Yes, who played Brian, the little boy on Alf, passed away. He was, I want to say 46 or something. It was very sad.
Yeah. So what was, I mean, he had stopped acting, obviously.
Yeah, there was not a lot of details about it. I think he went into the Navy at some point, and then I was reading, it's just kind of one of those sad things where he was in a car with his dog, and they found him in a parking lot, dead. And heat obviously was what did it, but we just don't know the details surrounding it or what was going on or why he was there. And it's just one of those sad things because, with people like that, they're locked in your mind.
At that age
as a kid. And I mean, I Alf was one of my favorite shows as a kid. And so we're practically the same age too. And so it's just one of those things where.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I always picture that POV shot from the credits.
Yes.
Where he's coming at camera. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Like that, like you said, like to me, he's just locked in at that, and yet we don't know what struggles people have inside of them. And he was, like you said, he was dealing with bipolar issues. And I mean, it's hard, it's not to say that it was his time as a child actor that led to his death, but it's not easy being a child actor. I guess that's the only point I'm making.
You just see so many examples of it, and it's, and even certain people like, I don't want to put words in their mouths, but actors like Natalie Portman. I don't know if she said this, but I've heard people like her say that they would never let their kids do it. And these are people who went through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Shannon Doherty has passed away, age 53.
Yeah. Beverly Hills 90210. I mean, that show is, when we were kids, that thing was a juggernaut.
It really, like, this is something that 5 years ago, Luke Perry died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost exactly 5 years ago, a little over. And he was around the same age. I think he was 52.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, first of all, that one definitely hit me when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I discussed his passing in my class, and these students didn't have a framework other than as, oh, you mean the dad on Riverdale?
Interesting.
Right. And I had to explain, like, you don't understand what a big deal that show was, what 90210 was, and what a big deal Luke Perry was. And with Shannon Doherty, kind of the same thing. I mean, Dylan and Brenda was like that was the Ross and Rachel.
Yeah.
Of its time, Yeah.
And Heathers, of course,
Yeah.
Maybe they belong to their eras, but they made huge impressions and certainly paved the way for things that we have now.
Well, and before that, she was in a TV show called Our House with Wilford Brimley. She was one of the voices on Secret of Nim.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she'd been acting since she was just a little teeny weeny. But I think more than anything, she'd been struggling with cancer for the last 8 years, and she chose to fight that battle in public.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, because, I think for a lot of people, it gave them hope that you can live a life, and you can, it's something that is difficult, but doable. And I think she benefited a lot of people in that way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But man, yeah, I mean, this is the thing about getting older, right? Because I was talking to my wife, and she's like, man, 53, it's not that old. And it's not. But like when we were kids, like Michael Landon died, right?
Wow. This is literally who I was thinking of, Zachy.
Really?
Yes.
And he was like 54.
Yeah.
Right? Raul Julia, he was like 53.
Uh-huh.
Right? But like when we were kids, like, oh my God. Like, Paul Ingalls, like
I was going to say, because I knew who he was, but he was not quite my person.
Right.
He was maybe on shows my parents watched or something, and I was aware, and he seemed old.
Right.
But he was obviously enormously impactful in his moments. So I was sort of relating it to like what it was probably like when I heard that Michael Landon died. Like, oh yeah, I know who that is, and I know he means a lot to a lot of people. And he's older, and then you get older, and you're like, holy crap, 53.
It's not that old.
Yep.
Not that old. John Landau also passed away.
Yes.
So James Cameron's creative partner for the last several years.
Yep.
So he was 63.
Yep.
And do we know what happened?
I think it was also cancer.
Cancer. Jeez. Yep. So in terms of James Cameron's, creative career, I feel like there's like the Gale Ann Hurd years.
Totally, yes. I hadn't even thought of it that way.
And then there's the John Landau years.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. They ran Lightstorm together.
Yeah, I mean, they first worked together on Titanic. Mm-hmm. But before that, John Landau, he had produced, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Dick Tracy. So very well versed in sort of the visual effects part of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Avatar, Battle Angel, one presumes he will remain credited in all the remaining Avatar films.
Yeah, and when you think about James Cameron's, demeanor and how difficult he can be, notoriously so, thinking about having a creative partner.
Yes.
I mean, this guy must have been, I don't know, had the touch. Speaking of having the touch, and it's, and all accounts after he passed, everybody was just saying what a lovely guy he was. So, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about being a producer, right? I mean, your job is to facilitate whatever the director needs. Mm-hmm. And again, one presumes that James Cameron can be quite persnickety about exactly how he wants things done, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, to have a partnership last that long, I mean, we're talking, almost 30 years. Well, that tells you something, know? Yeah. So John Landau gone at 63. And also I wanted to close out this segment with Bob Newhart. Mm-hmm. Now we were talking about, like this is somebody from your parents' generation or whatever. Me personally, Bob Newhart, I felt like he was mine too. Mm-hmm. Because the generation before me that had the Bob Newhart show, I had Newhart.
Right.
Which I felt like that was my show.
Yeah.
And then the show ended, and it ended up being, no, actually, it's not your show. It's that other show.
Yeah, one of the most clever series finales ever.
So Bob Newhart's comedy style is, I saw him referred to as the dean of deadpan comedy.
Totally, yeah.
And I think it's so apt, right? Because he was able to get big laughs by doing less. Mm-hmm. Right? So he was the studied straight man.
Yeah.
And certainly with Newhart, like I'm Larry, this is my brother Daryl, this is my other brother Daryl, and all of the shenanigans in that show, but like it was just his style and kind of that stutter. For me, I remember it made an impact on me at a very young age.
Yeah.
And
then,
it always stayed with
me. I mean, I probably first really was introduced to him when he was on The Simpsons.
The Simpsons was Krusty's funeral.
His delivery is just incredible. The eulogy he's giving. And then, you'd see him on late night and you knew your people revered him, so it made me pay closer attention. Right. And then of course he was Buddy, the elf's dad and Elf,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. More recently.
Yeah. The Bob Newhart show, remains one of the all-time great sitcoms. Mm-hmm. Right. And what's extraordinary to me is so that was like 72 to 78. And then he does Newhart from 82 to 90. So that actually lasted longer than the Bob Newhart show. Wow. And so you have two massive hit sitcoms, one decade after the other. That's very rarefied air.
Yeah.
And then as you alluded to, the final episode of Newhart was this practically unheard of gag, and I think it was poking fun at like the finale of Saint Elsewhere,
right,
which ended by implying that the whole series was just kind of the fantasy of this autistic boy who's the son of one of the lead characters. But what Newhart does is the final episode has it for those of you who don't know. So the Bob Newhart show in the 70s, he's Bob Hartley, and he's a psychiatrist in Chicago. And then in Newhart, he plays Dick Loudon, who's the owner of like a rustic inn in like Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And it's just the various goings on in this hotel. And the last episode kind of, you have like the town is bought out by Japanese businessmen, and things are going nuttier and nuttier. It's all crazy. And then it ends with Bob Newhart waking up, and he's like, oh my God, I just had this crazy dream. And he kind of wakes up his wife, and we assume that it's Mary Fran, who's the wife from that series. But it's Suzanne Plachette, the wife from the Bob Newhart show.
Right.
And she's just like, Bob, go back to bed or whatever. And so it turns out Dick Loudon and this whole inn for 8 seasons of Newhart was just the bad dream of Bob, the psychiatrist from the Bob Newhart show.
It's brilliant.
Which, again, I appreciate the creativity of that, and it's such a swing. But I will say, as a fan of Newhart, who only discovered the Bob Newhart show later, I was like, hey, wait a minute.
That's hilarious. But it's funny, not many shows could do that because they wouldn't have an actor who had been on 2 long-running established shows. Like, that was such a unique opportunity specifically to them.
Yeah. And what's amazing is that he had continued to work. He had another sitcom in the 90s called Bob. He had another sitcom in the 2000s with Judd Hirsch called George and Leo. And I mean, he acted in The Librarians, that Noah Wyle series.
Huh.
He was on Young Sheldon. Like, he never stopped working, and he was, at the time of his death, he was 94 years old.
Wow.
So I guess my point is, man, I mean, you talk about a career that's enviable, to work from basically from 1958 to the 2020s.
Wow.
He was working consistently.
Amazing.
Not too shabby,
Yeah.
So Bob Newhart, he will be missed. Let's take another break, and we can talk about the big new release this week. And we are back, and you know what else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zachy?
Why, it's those wacky tornadoes from Twister, now in plural form.
F5 tornadoes. Yeah. Actually, maybe that's not funny. I know there's been some people in this country that have been experiencing these natural disasters. But yes, Twisters, which we... That's terrible. Because my heart truly goes out. But dude, we just did the commentary for Twister. I mean, this world is fresh in our minds.
Very, very much so. So Twisters is in theaters now, and as we record this, it's headed for a substantial start.
Is it really? I hadn't seen.
As of its opening night, it's made $8 million, and it's heading for an opening weekend, which would be, I think, globally $100 million plus.
Wow.
Now, I should say, having gone to the screening last night, which you and I did, opening night, the movie ended, and my audience broke out into applause.
Yeah, well, mine did too, but I think there were some of the filmmakers there. I was noticing as credits were going, people were cheering.
Oh, interesting.
But I'm not discounting anything, because you could tell the audience was having a blast, and I went with a group of people, and we all had a blast.
Oh, okay. So I guess I know how you felt about it.
Sorry, yeah, cat's out of the bag a little bit. Like, Yeah. I mean, I thought this was like a really fun. My brother and I, we leaned over to each other at one point. We were commenting on the cinematography. We were like, this looks like movies used to look like. Like, this is what we want. And turns out, I mean, it was shot on 35 millimeter Kodak film, and it does make a difference. You can tell. And good filmmaking, by the way. But this also, we commented, felt like a lost 90s movie.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
And in the best way possible. And, we all came out, we had our, if maybe this, I wonder if possibly that. Yeah. But that aside, we all had smiles on our faces and had a great time.
Yeah. I gotta say, I went in knowing to some extent that it was proving polarizing with certain critics.
Oh, interesting. I had not heard that.
Yeah, and I hadn't read any reviews, but I just had certain reactions in my mind, and I was like, kind of trying to put it to one side. And what I found so interesting was after watching it, I was like, and then my oldest son, he's like, that was good. And then my third son, he's on the other side, he's like, that was good. I was like, well, they're the audience, Mm-hmm. I was actually thinking, I was like, Hamza is exactly the same age I was when the original film came out.
Wow.
Like, it came out between my junior and senior year, and he's about to start his senior year in a few weeks.
See, that's what blows my mind, is this is a legacy sequel. I mean, this,
yes,
30 years or whatever it is. And so I find that fascinating. I actually had the thought literally to myself during the movie, everyone says they don't make them like they used to. Well, they just did. Like, this is like they're making them like they used to. And everything that comes along with that. It's not particularly deep.
No.
And I think these days audiences do want that a little bit more than we were demanding out of certain blockbusters back in the day. This one truly does feel like a blockbuster from the 90s, even in terms of how deep it goes, possibly how corny, if you want to even use that word, or, certain villains and things. But
that's right. So sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to underscore that point, right? Because that's the thing about the first film. I think it's a very good movie of that kind, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not grading it on a curve. I'm like, well, does it give you what the title promises, right? Mm-hmm. And what we talked about the other day in terms of that movie worked because we find the characters endearing and their relationships or whatever. And do we buy the world that it's creating, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt like this one felt of a piece with that. I would say probably I have more affinity for that original film, but I've also lived with it for almost 30 years.
I had a similar feeling. I was like, I don't know that I'll ever be endeared to this one in that way, but I think that's impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I got to say, man, there's been a lot of like, man, Hollywood's trying to turn Glen Powell into a thing. And I watched this. I'm like, no, he is a thing.
I had the exact same response. I've been on the fence with him, and never anything negative, but obviously they're trying to push him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how do I feel about this? Am I responding to him? And I think there's been certain things where I've felt it, other things where I was like, I don't know. A big part of it, I've already said this, was you said he's really great in Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some.
Yep, that was the first time I saw him.
I rewatched it. He is a star in the making in that movie.
Yep.
If you put someone else in that role, it would be that guy, sure. But he's got a twinkle in his eye that makes that character that you could possibly find annoying really likable.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And that really did turn something in my mind a little bit. And then watching this, I was like, oh yeah, no, yep, he's a star. He's a star. I love him. Right? Like, he's very good in this. And it's another one where you cast this a little differently. Maybe you kind of don't like this guy,
Yeah.
But he's, whatever it is he's doing in here, where he's got to be a little obnoxious, but he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. He's a smart guy. He's perfect.
Yeah, it's very much, it's going through certain like preordained paces as far as the character arcs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what I want. Like, that's what I'm here for.
Totally. A little old fashioned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, going in, I was a little worried. I was just going to be like CGI overload, and it really wasn't. It felt very comparable to what DeBont did with the first one.
I totally agree. It's funny because when we were doing the commentary, I didn't bring this up, but seeing the trailers for Twisters, I thought, oh, this is just going to be CGI overload, and I'm going to miss the practical stuff. But then watching Twister, you're like, well, what? Would they make a real tornado? It's all CG. Like, I mean, what was and I think then the bad impulse would be to try to make it extra sensational because it's 2024 and we've got to keep up with 2024 audiences, and they get to watch these superhero movies where everyone flies and everything blows up. And I feel really happy that they did not follow that whim. Right. This feels, within reason. It feels like it's trying to be somewhat realistic, and of course you got to heighten some sorts of things to make it, hit home the danger and whatnot. But yeah, I like that it tried to keep its feet on the ground in terms of reality. And that makes it more exciting to me personally.
It's, there's sort of like this culture war nexus that everything gets pulled into lately. And I feel like this movie is just another casualty of that, right? Because you got people on the right who are like, there's too much climate change talk in this.
Good Lord.
And then you got people on the left who are like, there's not enough climate change talk in this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, what do we want here? What do we want out of this movie? Okay, first of all, there is enough reference to climate change to, I think, without it turning into a dissertation, you get some of what's going on, right? Am I wrong about that?
I agree with you. I don't think it's overt, but it is certainly referenced.
Yeah, and I'm like, what do we need here? I mean, like, does everything have to be a thing?
Well, yes. The answer to that is yes, if you exist on the internet. But I think I agree with you. Like, look, it's really important to, be plugged into these sorts of things, these realities in our world. I agree with that. However, can we just have some fun for 2 hours?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and what I mean by that is, do you have to be mad about what isn't in there? Do you have to be mad about what is in there? What do you like? This movie isn't that, man. This movie's a roller coaster. Like, you're going to this movie to get on a roller coaster ride. Just have fun. That's me. People may disagree.
No, but I think ultimately you structure the scenario such that there's real stakes involved. I like that our main character, Kate, played by Daisy Edgar Jones, who I've never seen her in anything before this.
I haven't either. What did you think? I liked her. My group was a little split on her, actually.
I liked her. I thought she did a good job.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah. I like that she has a backstory that's, superficially comparable to Helen Hunt's, in the first one, but it's different enough where you kind of understand where she's coming from. They set up like the city life versus country life dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Like the country folks, they're the salt of the earth, which feels a little on the nose, but I mean, I didn't have an issue with that. But I like that she is the emotional focus of the movie, and I like that probably the major beat involves something she does. I liked that.
I agree. I mean, we can get into that in spoilers, but agreed. I think maybe there's some things they could have hammered a little more, and maybe that would have helped the people who weren't. I don't think it was her. I think I do have like one note about the ending that's still positive, but just a thought. But I thought she felt like that person. And so not knowing her, I was immediately like, oh, I like this person and I want them to succeed, and to me, that was a thumbs up.
So you want to talk some spoilers?
Yeah, we may as well, because we're just going to talk about set pieces. I don't want to ruin it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Spoilers.
So one thought I had, and I'm curious what you think. Did you get the sense that maybe in an earlier draft, Maura Tierney was supposed to be Helen Hunt?
Definitely.
Right?
We all said that at the end.
Really?
Yeah. Even the way she's shot, like introduced, she emerges from shadows.
Yep.
And also the character, what's her name? Kate, I think, or something.
Kate, yeah.
Kate, she has a version of Dorothy.
Yes, right.
And you think, well, where did she get that?
So then my thought is, because this was initially developed as a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, why didn't they do that?
With Joe Kosinski, right?
Yeah.
I was surprised to see his name. He was one of the...
Well, not just that, Brian. I mean, it says based on characters created by Michael Crichton. And I'm like, what? Well, did he create the tornado? Because ain't nobody else who created in this movie.
Yeah, you are totally right. You're totally right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that, like, it's certainly not a deal breaker for me, but I mean, I'm just wondering what went into that. Like, why didn't they? Why did they steer away from that?
Well, I think she had proposed a version, right? She was trying to develop something, and the
Helen
Hunt. Helen Hunt, sorry, yes. And I think she wanted to write and direct it.
Okay.
And then they turned that down. So maybe there was some bitterness. I don't know.
Oh, so maybe she's just like, well, I'm not doing just like a cameo. So then they just kind of...
Maybe.
That makes sense.
Or maybe even she just didn't respond to their take. And also, that's the other thing too. I mean, when you hear there's going to be a sequel to Twister without a script or anything, you just know it's going to happen. Your mind probably goes to the lesser versions of that first.
Sure.
And so you don't know. And to my mind, this worked out. So, maybe she just, with all those things combined, just didn't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, regardless, I mean, I think the like I said, I think the character beats that they did give her track enough that Act 3 feels like a solid payoff to what we see in the prologue.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, the one thing, I'll go back to it that I was going to say, and maybe I need to watch it again, but I was in the third act, my friends were saying, at least one in particular was saying, they didn't feel, with Helen Hunt's character, it's personal. Like when it happened, and it's personal to this character too, by the way. But, Helen Hunt's character loses her dad to a tornado, and she is bound and determined, bordering on obsessed with tornadoes and figuring out how to study them so people don't get killed by them anymore. And Kate in this movie has a similar sort of thing, but her conclusion, their note was they didn't feel that steely determinedness on her face at the end to the same degree as Helen Hunt's character, which, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I did wonder, the climax, the characters get split up where you have half the people in a movie theater trying to help locals, and then you have her driving out in her truck basically firing these rockets into the tornado. And I was like, maybe they could have played her even slightly different, because I was more compelled by all the theater business than I was with her or her danger or possibly lack of danger as she was staring down the hugest tornado in the whole film. So to me, this is a nitpick. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I like what happened. I know why she was motivated. She had lost all of her friends, and it really comes down to she's going to save those people in the theater by dissolving this tornado, right?
Well, that's exactly it, right? Because Anthony Ramos' character Javi, he's like, this building can't protect them for what's about to come.
Yep.
And that's why she decides to go out. So in other words, it's her doing that or them dying, everybody dying for sure.
Yep. And I don't know, maybe if you had tightened the screws even a little bit more and shown like when the truck gets overturned and it's like it's crunching and she's running out of space, but she's got to hit that damn button, and maybe that would have helped with their note. And I didn't think about it at the time, but after they said it, I understood possibly why they felt that way, because for me, one of the most harrowing things in the entire movie was Glen Powell holding on to the girl with the drone.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that became an iconic image in my mind. Like actually that whole business in the movie theater, when the screen gets ripped away and it's framed, the curtains of the theater are framing the horror of nature outside.
Yeah.
My brother said he looked over and he goes, dude, you had the hugest smile on your face. And I did. There was something kind of on a meta level about looking at the framing of a movie theater to this adventure, this, like this horror film kind of playing in these people in a movie theater, almost getting sucked into it, almost like we are in that theater observing that moment. And I loved every bit of that sequence. I thought that was so exciting. And I thought the setting was so exciting. And I loved seeing Glen Powell too. Going to what you were saying earlier, she's allowed to finish her business by herself.
Right.
And he's there helping people, but he has a moment where he stops, he gets scared. Yeah. And I really appreciated that from our male hero. Right.
Well, there's a bit there where, he's pinned under the thing and she's trying to rescue him. And I was like, wait, are they going to kill Glen Powell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I for a second I was like, are they really?
In the pool?
Yeah. No, not the pool. Before the water tower collapses.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And then Javi, has his face turn, right?
Totally. And he comes in and puts the thing. That's the thing where I could almost see someone, I'm not going to, like maybe a little more cynically being like, okay, he showed up at the right time. But I'm like, no, man, this is what I want to watch. I want to see this guy have I agree. The heel turn, come in at the last second. That's not what I'm in the mood for. I'm
a sucker for that. I'm a sucker for that. I gotta be honest. But by the way, I do also like that we got to see David Cornsweet play Lex Luthor before he plays Superman.
Wasn't he great?
He's like, who cares about the people?
What's funny? Yes, he does finally become that mustache twirly guy. But I actually kind of appreciated his more subdued annoyance with the Kate character. Like, I guess we're following her, like that kind of thing. Like he was that guy, but he wasn't so on the nose until he has that blow up at the end. But I still liked it.
Well, it's that's the funny thing watching him, because I was like, is that David Cornsweet? Because I didn't know he's in this. And it's funny watching him in something right before he's going to be in The Thing,
and everyone will go, yeah, he will be the most recognizable person in this.
Yeah.
Movie.
It reminds me of like when I watched Munich, knowing that Daniel Craig was about to play James Bond.
Right. Exactly.
And so you're filtering everything through that prism. So definitely I was like, hey, look, it's Superman, No, but he was good. I liked him in it. And I liked Anthony Ramos, honestly. I've liked him. He was in that last Transformers movie last year, and that movie was whatever, but I liked him in it. And he was in Dumb Money also.
Oh yeah.
He's the guy who works at the GameStop.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So he's been kind of like on the rise. So I've been like glad to see him in stuff because I think he's an interesting presence,
Yeah. Was he was in The Heights, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which kind of got underseen, I think, because of COVID, but
that's right.
Yeah. But yeah, I like him.
I think the dynamics between the cast work. I like that it's similar enough. People are like, oh, it's just a glorified remake. I'm like, it's really not though. Unless you just say the presence of tornadoes equals a remake.
I was thinking about that because we had a chain, like a text chain this morning, everyone going back and forth, and I thought, I kind of appreciate how they're different because you could have just done a retread of the first one, and the first one takes place in 24 hours. And the romance is front and center, and the complications of that romance. And in this one, it's over the course of about a week, I want to say, the romance is very different. And in a way, you don't get to let up with the tornadoes in the first movie, like I said, because it's 24 hours. And this one, the story is important because we're going to break away from the action for a while to get into the business that's happening with these characters. So it's got to matter. And I did think it was interesting. I mean, you get into the Anthony Ramos character is involved with tornadoes for what we believe are reasons. And then those reasons are twisted a little bit at some point. And how do we feel about that? How do we feel about him? And then also with Kate's study and the things that she wanted to do. And she was so optimistic and young and thinking she could change the world. And it got her friends killed. I mean, not her stuff, but them being in the field, her friends died and she wanted to put that aside. And then
she says like she was kind of treating it like a game.
Yeah. And then Glen Powell's character, who I loved because at first he's this cocky, sort of douchey seeming guy, but he's not. And like he is encouraging her and he believes in what she's doing. Let's work together. And it becomes almost like a weather procedural in the second half of figuring out how to finish her business.
Yeah. I totally, I tracked with all of that. And maybe I'm just showing my age, but I appreciated sort of the old fashionedness of it.
Yes, and you saying, I mean, we're recording a little more earlier than we usually do for these kinds of movies where we typically get to see the box office before we talk about them. But, and I haven't really seen people's responses to this, but you saying it's projected to make over 100 million kind of warms my heart because I want a movie like this that doesn't have Tom Cruise in it or someone who is a 100% guarantee at the moment, but it's just a old fashioned grip your seat, have a good time roller coaster. I want movies like this to make $100 million. So that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I also just want to say too, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'll let you finish your thought.
Well, I just want to say, I did like that the movie stopped occasionally to focus on the aftermath. You know, we're not just having a fun. This is not a rodeo that we're watching, and these are like bronching bulls, these tornadoes. Like these are things that devastate lives, devastate towns, and they actually get into that and they stop. And the characters are very compelled to stop and help these people, right? And I mean, we're in spoilers. I mean, the Glen Powell character, we see he sells T-shirts, and it seems like he's making money off of people's tragedy, but we find that that's not the case at all. He's raising money to help people. And
I think sorry, just to echo your point, I think the movie very smartly puts us with Cary Elwes' group, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking at Bill Paxton's group through their eyes, and we're getting that perspective. You know what I mean? And then we realize, oh wait, those guys are Bill Paxton. You know, like, you know what I mean?
Totally. Totally. But something I have to bring up too, because I thought this moment was so funny. When we're first introduced to the Glen Powell's character, and it's like, he calls himself like a tornado wrangler, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, so what is everyone's goal here? And when his is basically to shoot fireworks up a tornado, and he's just like, yep. It's been proven you can shoot fireworks up a tornado. My brother and I were cackling. Like, just the whole concept of that, of just like adrenaline YouTube junkie guy, just like, yep, you can launch fireworks up a tornado. Yeah, like it just
smash that subscribe button.
Exactly. But then, of course, the Chekhov's rockets,
right?
Rocket launcher from his truck. But I love the interplay too with Glen Powell, where Kate's character thinks he's kind of douchey, and they're both studying the clouds, like, where do you think it's gonna go? And she's like,
yep,
want an iced tea? I'm gonna get you an iced tea. And then she realizes, like, oh, she's going over there, she's gonna go follow that cloud. Like, I thought that was fun interplay.
Well, that and I mean, it's like we know where this is headed, right? Like for me, opening scene, she's in the prologue, and she kind of kisses her boyfriend. I'm like, oh, he gonna die in a second, because she got to end up with Glen Powell,
right.
Without even knowing it, you're like, well, I know, and so again, I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm like, it's like when you watch Twister, you're not like, well, it's going to end with Helen Hunt signing them divorce papers, like, right. So you're kind of like, you go on a roller coaster ride knowing where you're going to end up, but the point is the ride, right? That's what this felt like to me.
Right.
So when we're at the airport, that was Paul Scheer at the end, by the way, right?
Yes, that was so much. I was like, what? Like, at first, because I didn't think he was going to do a whole lot. He does end up being kind of a funny.
Yeah. But in the beginning, you're like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But, it's like, okay, well, obviously he's got to go in after her. And, I love the thing with his the drill thing, I was like, hey, I was like, that's clever,
Right.
Now, again, it's like, well, he's going to go in after. Although I will say this, I thought it'd be funny, like when he goes into the airport, and Kate's back is to the camera, and he goes up to her. I thought it'd be funny if he taps her on the shoulder and turns around, and it's some dude with just heavy metal hair and like a big dark mustache. What do you want, pal? And then
you're right.
And she's like, Tyler, and the camera pans over, and she's like standing just off camera.
I would have loved that, actually.
But I was gonna say, I like that they end up together, presumably. but I also like that he doesn't kiss her.
Wow, I kind of don't remember that, but I respect that too. Like it sort of felt like a real relationship. In a weird
Exactly.
way.
That's I was like, it's very like it's a very movie ending to be like, and now I'm gonna sweep you into my arms and just lay one on you, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
But no, something's starting. We don't know what it is.
yeah. That's a good point. Yeah,
You know.
I like that.
Apparently, they filmed a kiss, but they cut it out,
Smart. Do
which
both.
I personally think was a smart choice.
Yeah, I like that.
You know. But yeah, you know, a very pleasant surprise for me with Twisters. Not to say I had low expectations or anything like that, but I would say I enjoyed it more than I expected to.
Same. I don't know that I had any expectations. It was something I was going to watch, and well, I guess I did. I thought it was going to be sort of a CGI fest where they just try to go over the top.
Yeah.
And they didn't, and I was very happy with where they landed with this one.
Well, there we go. I think that's a good place for us to land this show. What do you think?
I think so. Well, and I want to call it the director because I thought he did such a great job. Lee Isaac Chung
Yes.
did Minari, which I haven't seen, but is in my DVR. But I mean, man, you give this movie to other people and you come up with a million different things. But what he crafted here, the tone, the way it was filmed, the characters, the gang, the way it was cast. Actually, I thought that as we were going along, I thought the casting was great. Everybody was interesting. Even the very minor characters. Yeah, they made a great little package here. I thought it was pretty good.
This one, by the way, just as an observation, this one had much more of a body count than the previous one.
That's true.
And
What'd you think of that?
And seeing them characters get pulled into the vortex was goddamn terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're just like that. I would not want that to happen to me.
No. It's funny, actually. One of our friends was saying he almost wished he hadn't seen it. And he wanted it to focus more on her in the underpass and then the sort of haunting realization that everyone is gone.
I could see that working.
Me too. I was like, hey, actually, that's not a bad note. But,
yeah.
It's kind of both, right? I mean, in some ways you get to see what that would look like and what you don't want to happen to you.
Right.
In a way that they could not show you in 1996 just with technology.
I think certainly with the opening sequence, we get enough of a sense of who those characters are that it makes your heart stop a little bit each time they're just whisked away. Like that Indian guy and then the girl with the glasses, and it's like we kind of know them, and then obviously the boyfriend, Yep,
and they seem so young.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's what she said. It's just this naivete, like, oh, I'm this kid. I'm going to solve this problem,
Yeah. But this is one of the things I can't say I've felt in a while, but this is a movie I know I'll watch again.
I have a feeling you're right. And just to circle back to what I was saying earlier, I wonder what like today's kids are going to think of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I was looking at the potential high box office as, oh, this is a 4-quadrant movie. It's succeeding, but
yeah,
maybe certain quadrants don't go to the movies. I don't know. So I do wonder if a teenager would plunk down bucks.
I mean, I would hope that the same way we enjoyed the original when it came out, that this one would be enjoyed in the same way,
Well, I'll say specifically with our group last night. So Sean Coyle, who joined us on our commentary, he's a huge Twister head, as you'll know if you listen to that. But he introduced the movie to his daughter, and it's one of her favorite movies now. And she came with us last night, and so it was really fun to have her there with him.
Yeah,
and they had matching T-shirts on.
So
it was
cute,
freaking adorable, man. And they really enjoyed it. So I took that as a seal of approval.
Good enough for me.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned. And as I said, both of my kids, so 17 and 13, they both liked it a lot.
Nice.
But hey, let us know your thoughts. What did you think of Twisters? Are we off whisked away on a tornado of our own making? I hope not. And wherever that tornado whisks us, as if Glen Powell is there, I'll be okay with it. Because I know he will save me. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. As always, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating. Every little bit helps. I've said this before, but we are on YouTube, and if you want to hit subscribe on that, that would also help us a lot. We're still in the process of building out what that YouTube channel is going to look like, but I'm excited to do something with it. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's been very cool. People have been finding us there.
People have, which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. In a short amount of time, certain episodes and commentaries have been hitting numbers I didn't expect. And so we've got some things brewing. So
fingers crossed.
We'll share those soon. Yeah.
Brian, anything you want to hype up?
Yeah. Young Jedi Adventures. I'm really excited. I've had a lot of people tell me how much they're enjoying season 1, which has been out for a while, but season 2, new episodes are dropping August 14th on Disney Junior and Disney Plus. So I hope people will enjoy those.
Nice. And I got some pieces up at the Chronicle and also at the Wrap. As we record this, my review of Cobra Kai Season 6 is at the Wrap, so you can check that out. And I'm sure I got some other stuff coming too. But with that, on behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been Movie Film 296.
Yeah.
Is it 296?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm having trouble processing that.
I know.
That's a lot. Like I said, we're working our way towards 300. What's going to happen there? Who knows? You got to keep listening. But we will catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Welcome, friends. It's the MovieFilm Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian.